Paul George recently had a sit down with Clipper fans where he talked about the team, what he's been doing recently, and how he feels going into the season. Did we learn anything new? Anything to be excited about? Anything to be concerned about? I'm going to talk about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day. I am your host, Darian Vaziri, 18 years a Clipper fan. Also have my own YouTube channel known as Dime Dropper. You can also find it on podcast format on your favorite podcasting platforms, where I talk about LA sports, mainly Clipper games after they happen, and also Laker games after they happen, as well as NBA history. And of course, Clipper vlogs and events. When I go to events like this one that I'm going to talk about in this episode, I also film it. So if you want to watch the version of the episode I am going to be talking about, or should I say the interview that I'm going to be talking about in this episode, you can go to my YouTube channel and find it. So just to say what's happened in this episode, Paul George it was called In the Paint with Paul George, but basically like a Q&A. Jamie Maggio, longtime sideline reporter for the Clippers, was the interviewer asking him questions, and he answered questions in front of fans and talked about a lot of things. He talked about how he's feeling, what he's done in the summer, what the team has done in the summer, the vibe and feeling around the team. Also talked about the Intuit Dome and talked about Steve Ballmer a lot. So, and of course his friend John Wall. So I'm going to be nailing all of those in this episode, starting with how he looked, how he was feeling, the vibe I was getting. I was in the first row, which was awesome. Shout out to my man DL2, who is a new season ticket holder for the Clippers, and because of that, they put those new season ticket holders in the first row, and I was happy enough to tag along with him and get to sit there and get really good videos for the masses. But one thing I really noticed, obviously, just first impressions. That guy's so tall, man. Tall, long arms, looked really like muscular and fit, like he just went to the gym type of thing. Like, Paul looks great right now, and he was talking and saying how he's 100% healthy. And just hearing that from Paul George, especially after the 2019-20 season, after the countless injuries he's had since he's come to the Clippers, hearing him say he's 100% healthy, he feels great, you could not be happier as a Clipper fan hearing that. And to go along with that, he was talking about how this summer he's taken no time off besides his wedding. He's been in the gym constantly punching in his timesheet at the facility in Playa Vista. And he said that throughout the summer, 10, 11 Clipper players have also been with each other practicing. And you see these pictures on social media throughout the summer. And that's something I really noticed. And it's sad because Isaiah Hartenstein was part of those workouts too, and he ended up not coming back. But guys like Luke Kennard, who also tweeted about it the other day, how they've been putting in work all summer. And they don't have to do that. Players are entitled to take their time off in the offseason and then report to training camp when they have to come back to their jobs. They don't have to do any of this. But most players these days do work out in the offseason and stay in shape and all that. But for the Clippers to not just individually work out and stay in shape, but to be there together, and this is Paul's words, not even mine, it just shows how much they like spending time with one another, being around each other. And that's something that's so incredible about this Clipper team. And I'll tell you this right now. I've been a Clipper fan for 18 years, and in those 18 years, it's been the best years in Clipper franchise history, obviously. I've never seen a Clipper team that was this good, that had this much chemistry on and off the court. Because Lob City didn't like each other like that. And I have a personal source, and I'm just going to say it on this podcast, screw it. Blake Griffin told one of my friends that he and Chris Paul were never close. They never liked each other like that. Paul George and Kawhi came to the Clippers together, so you already knew they liked each other. But it's the role players that the front office has surrounded them with, that is so awesome. Not only just the fit on the court, but how much they enjoy spending time with each other. And you saw that in 2021, the change after the Clippers. And I'm not saying that he was the person that was bringing the chemistry down, which some people have accused him of, but when Montrezl Harrell left, and then obviously Lou Williams kind of, I'm not saying that Lou Williams was bringing down chemistry. I think Lou's a great locker room guy. But having those two leave was kind of like the end of that kind of transitional period between Lob City and this team. And now it's really the Kawhi and Paul George era of Clipper basketball. And now it's how can Lawrence Frank, Michael Winger, Jerry West surround them with the complementary pieces that they'll not only play with on the court, but also find a way to get along with off the court. And they seem so, like last season when you went to games, if you went to games, because I went to 23 of them, which was a career high for me, even though I've gone to games my whole life, the amount of enthusiasm on the bench with each player, getting so excited for guys like Reggie, Zubats. It was just great. And I honestly want to give Patrick Beverley a shout out, even though he's on the other side right now. I think he was a big part of building that chemistry in the 2021 season. But you really saw it come out in 2022. I mean, the team is so tight-knit. They love playing together. And that's awesome. That is awesome because it's not that they just like playing with each other, because the 2019 team liked playing with each other. But they didn't have this talent. And they also didn't have this coach, Ty Lue. And that's something that Paul George referenced in this interview. He said that Ty Lue is not even like, it doesn't even feel like a coach to them. He says it feels like an older brother almost, like a friend that they can talk to about anything. And that's so relatable. He's played in the league. Obviously, Glenn Rivers had played in the league. But Ty Lue, for whatever reason, he has a different way of reaching these guys. And he's reached them, especially Paul George, I've talked about it many times in the podcast, but his game and his confidence has flourished since Ty Lue has taken over. He put the ball in his hands more. We've used him as a point forward since we haven't had a traditional point guard. And he has taken off and ran with it. And obviously in 2021 had his best moments for the Clippers and probably his best moments in the postseason in his career. I'd say even better than the Indiana moments, because the odds were stacked against him, against Utah, and stacked against the Clippers. And for him to go in and get that 38, 39-point performance in Game 5 against the Jazz and then lead the team to victory with another really good performance in the curse breaker Game 6 was nothing, especially after the entire offseason. People had called him playoff P, pandemic P, talking about how bad he was in the bubble. I'd never seen a player be slandered like that since LeBron in 2011. Every single game that Paul George played poorly in the 2020-2021 season, the jokes and memes, the way he would get roasted on social media, Twitter particularly, was out of control. He had a really good season that year, and every time he played a good game, it was, well, let's see what he does in the playoffs. But when he had a bad regular season game, it's not that energy. It's, oh my God, this is what he's going to do in the playoffs. It was just out of control. So for him to bounce back from that insane pressure that was put on him in 2021, you got to give a lot of credit to Ty Lue for giving him that confidence back. And of course, Paul George himself. But that was something to take away from that part of the interview, was the team has been together. They've been practicing constantly. And it feels as though for the first time, the only other season I felt this kind of optimism going into a season was 2019-20. But that seemed more like arrogance coming from the players. It seemed like, oh my God, we had this really solid team last year in 2019 that we took the Warriors to 6. Now we're adding not one, but 2 superstar caliber players to the roster. Oh my God, look at our team on paper. We're going to win the championship. That was the kind of vibe that they were giving off. And the fans, myself included, were giving off. But we didn't actually see how it would actually work until everything went to garbage. Let's put it that way. Now, the Clippers have had a couple seasons where they've been humbled in ways. Humbled in the bubble. Humbled by just the circumstances of injuries happening. It's very unfortunate. And having to deal with that the entirety of last season without having the best part of the team. They know, and Lawrence Frank mentioned this in his interview that I referenced in the last episode, that they know that there's a window. And they want to maximize this window. And that window starts with having a guy that can lead a team to a championship. And I don't think Chris Paul was that guy for the Clippers. I don't think Blake Griffin was that guy either. But Kawhi Leonard is that guy. We've seen it in Toronto. We've seen him play like the best player in the league in the playoffs for the Clippers in 2021. And the supporting cast and secondary guy in Paul George should be enough to get the job done if they perform well in big moments and, of course, are healthy. And that's the main thing. The fact that Paul George seemed healthy and said he feels as good as he's felt in a long time, said that he's been watching what he's eaten all summer. And it's funny because Jamie Maggio was like, he even didn't eat as much pasta when he was in Italy for his wedding because he just didn't want to put on the extra carbs. So Paul George really taking his body seriously, and not to sound weird, he looked great when I saw him up close. Like, he looked really great. So Clipper fans, and I'm telling you this right now, you listening, I'm so excited about Paul George this season. He looks as hungry to win a ring as any star in the NBA right now. He's never been to the finals. He wants to get there so badly, and it feels as though, unlike that 2019-20 season, there is optimism, but it's a controlled optimism from the fans and the players. I've told you many times that I think the Clippers can win a championship, and should win the championship this season, but it's all about health, and you got to just stay cautious and, just hope for the best. Whereas in the 2019-20 season, I was coming in rah, loud as hell. The Clippers are going to win the championship. Nobody can mess with us. And that was kind of the vibe I was getting from the players as well. Paul George said, it's going to be hard to score on us. Montrez said, it's a wrap or it's over. I remember on First Take or The Jump. It was just a lot of arrogance. And they were skipping steps in the regular season. There was the whole Kawhi was coming late to practice, showing up late to team flights, not practicing much at all. And that was a Glenn Rivers thing too. That he was like, I think Paul and Kawhi have only had like 5 practices. Again, going back to the last episode where Lawrence Frank was talking about load management versus keeping rhythm and continuity going, keeping that flow going. That's one thing I think Ty Lue's done a much better job of, is trying to prioritize rhythm and flow. You can't just not have your superstars practice. That doesn't set a good example for the team. It all starts from the top. And ever since Ty Lue has taken over, he has held Paul George and Kawhi Leonard accountable. He's shown them that if you're playing like trash, I'm going to take you out of the game. Look no further than the 2021 game at the Staples Center against the Atlanta Hawks. Clippers were getting destroyed. He clears his bench, puts all the bench guys in, takes Kawhi and Paul out, something Glenn Rivers would have never done. And they responded. And all the players have responded to Ty Lue's more disciplined ways than Glenn Rivers. So it seems as though the squad knows they have the best team in the league on paper, knows that they should be the best team in the league on the court, but they also understand it's going to be tough. They need a lot of things to go right, going to need a little bit of luck, and they got to be locked in and not skip any steps. Practice as a team, play as a team, and play hard. And that's it. And I would be very encouraged with those signs. And one of the signs of encouragement is the one new signing, John Wall. What did Paul George say about his friend? Find out coming up. Jordan Poole is right now the favorite to win the NBA Sixth Man of the Year. But if you're a Clipper fan, I would suggest putting in a vote or placing your bets for Norman Powell. He's plus 2,500 to win Sixth Man of the Year. That is 10th place or 9th place. And the odds I'm looking at are on Bet Online. Yes, Bet Online is your number one source for all your basketball betting info this season, but not just basketball, also football, soccer, the World Cup's coming up, MLB playoffs are coming up. So many great sports to bet on. It doesn't matter if it's college or pro. You can find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth breakdowns and articles on every game you can find in any sport. As always, BetOnline is your number one source for your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, another thing Paul George talked about or was asked about at the sit-down at the forum was John Wall. How does he look? How does it feel to have John Wall on the team? And by the way, the audience gave a nice applause for when John Wall's name was mentioned by Jamie. And it seems like everybody's super excited to have him. I'm super excited to have him. And I don't know if I've said this on the podcast, but John Wall was like one of my favorite players in Washington. I have his shirt from the one Wizards game I went to in D.C. in 2015 when he was in the middle of his prime. I was such a big fan of John Wall because his passion, besides his game, which was electric. I mean, amazing, going to the basket, dunking. He was unreal. His first step, his penetration, his passing. But it was his intensity. The way he motioned to the crowd and got intense and yelled at them to bring more noise. I can't wait to see that at Staples Center because he's got such a point to prove and a chip on his shoulder. I already know he's going to be pumping up that Staples Center crowd, that Clipper faithful, that Clipper nation, and it's going to be great to respond to that. That was one thing Patrick Beverley did so well. He really engaged the crowd, and John Wall's awesome at that. And he just has so much natural energy. He talked about it in the Players Tribune article that I mentioned in the last episode, that he was that kid that got in trouble a lot in school. I was like that too because I had a lot of energy. As you can tell, I have a lot of energy for this podcast. And John Wall has a lot of energy too. And on the basketball court, you can kind of let all that go out and let all of that, spill out onto the court. And Lawrence Frank, one thing I really liked that he said was that John is so enthusiastic. Between him and Reggie, their aura is so uplifting, and that's awesome. You want guys that are positive and are going to bring good vibes to the team. And John Wall seems like he's doing that. And Paul George said, because I talked about the article or the letter in the Players Tribune in the last episode about how he contemplated suicide. John Wall contemplated suicide. And Paul George said that he's in the best mental state of his career. Not of his career, but in a long time. And that's great to hear because he's happy to be in LA. He's happy to be playing with Paul George. And Paul George said that John looks great. And a big thing he said, and this is going to make you happy, if you're a Clipper fan, of course, his shot looks better than I've ever seen. That is huge. Absolutely huge. Because that was the one weakness of John Wall's game, even when he was in his prime, was guys would sag off, guys would go underneath screens, make him shoot. His mid-range got a lot better over the years, but still wasn't too great. Wasn't on some Chris Paul level or, even I wouldn't even say even a Reggie Jackson level. And three-pointers were really not his thing. But Paul George says, and in the videos of the Rico Hines run that I talked about many episodes ago, John Wall's jumper looked pretty good. And there have been a couple of clips that have surfaced about guys going underneath screens on John Wall and like open runs and practices, and he says you can't do that anymore. And that's something I referenced many times. If John Wall hits the jumper enough that people have to go over the screen, then John Wall will probably end up being the third best player on the Clippers, because once you let him get into the paint, he has the wherewithal and the decision making and the experience being in those positions to find guys, whether it's Zubac's dumping the ball to him under the basket or kicking it out to corners, that nobody on our team has. He is a guy that averaged 10 assists a game in Washington. This guy was one of the best passers in the league. So my only concern was, will he be able to create those opportunities, because he's not as explosive as he once was. But he doesn't have to be as explosive as he once was if he's hitting that jump shot. If he's hitting that jump shot and people have to go over the top of the screen, he's going to get into the paint at will, and then it's going to be fun times for the Clippers. I can promise you that. So hearing Paul George speak about him like that was awesome, and he's so happy to be here. And that's one thing the Clippers have done such a great job of in the Ballmer era, is keeping players happy and making this not only a destination for people that aren't on the Clippers yet, but when they get to the Clippers, unless a crazy good offer comes up like with Isaiah Hartenstein, they don't want to leave. I mean, Lou Williams, he was very sad to leave the Clippers. He almost retired. Montrezl Harrell, Patrick Beverley felt betrayed when they didn't get the offers that they expected. Blake Griffin felt betrayed. So the Clippers have really done a great job. Of course, Paul George and Kawhi re-signed. Nico Batum re-signed. Ivica Zubac has re-signed. People want to be here. Marcus Morris re-signed. The team wants to be here. And you know where that starts from? Steve Ballmer. And there were many great things that Paul George said about Steve Ballmer, and I'm going to tell you what they were to close it out coming up. So, as you guys all know and are aware, the change in ownership for the Clippers is the biggest difference in the franchise from the dog days and now. And Paul George said that it all starts from Steve, the culture. He talked about the culture of the Clippers. The Clippers' culture before, when I first became a fan, was empty seats, nobody cares, secondary organization in the city, which you can still say that's a thing, but constant losing, don't want to pay the players. If they have one good season, they're never going to re-sign them because Sterling is cheap, and bad ownership, and also bad luck and injuries. Bad luck and injuries, you can argue, are still a thing for the Clippers, but the other things have been removed. Now it's an owner that wants to win and will do anything to win. Obviously, they talked about the Intuit Dome at the interview and talked about how there's going to be more leg room than anywhere in the league. There are going to be more bathrooms than anywhere in the league. They want to make it so that if you get out of your seat, it's going to be a quick trip back to your seat, that you don't have to sit in a line. They want to minimize lines as much as possible. And Paul George seemed very excited about the Intuit Dome, to have their own home. Very excited. And he says the team is excited. But there's a reason why I'm not too excited. Of course I'm excited about the Intuit Dome. But the Clippers have a very big season, their biggest in franchise history, coming up this season at the Staples Center. So it's not about raising a banner at the Intuit Dome or having a parade in Inglewood. The Clippers need to have a parade and raise a banner at the Staples Center first, or the Crypto.com Arena, if you don't like me saying Staples Center because I'm so used to it. They got business to take care of right now, this season. So before we get into the Intuit Dome, Clippers got to take care of business this season. And Paul George emphasized that Steve Ballmer is the best owner in the league. Those were his words. You can check out the interview again on my YouTube channel, but those were his words. The best owner in the league. We play for Steve, and they feel good doing it. So nobody has ever said they play for Donald Sterling and meant it in a way of like, yeah, we want to win for you. No. Steve Ballmer acts like the biggest fan when he's at games, on the road. I mean, it's become meme-worthy at this point how enthusiastic he is. It's the most polar opposite thing from Sterling. And I did an episode on this. If you want to hear about me going in depth about Sterling versus Ballmer, check out the episode I made with the historian Jason Levin, who I also saw, by the way, at the event, the Paul George event. But Steve Ballmer is willing to do whatever it takes. And that was awesome to hear. And he also shouted out other guys, Lawrence Frank, Michael Winger, guys in the front office, the GMs that give the stars so much confidence in this organization. And that was one thing I was afraid of when Glenn Rivers was fired. I was really afraid that what if Kawhi, especially, not really Paul George, but what if Kawhi doesn't like that decision? Because I know that Glenn Rivers was one of the bigger reasons why he came to the Clippers, because he kept saying in the media day when the Clippers first got Kawhi and Paul, championship coach. Well, technically, we have a championship coach now with Ty Lue, who's won as many championships as Glenn Rivers as a coach, but I was just afraid that maybe Kawhi Leonard wouldn't like that they fired Glenn. But he was okay with it, and I think after seeing what Ty Lue did in that first season with the Clippers, I think he's won over not only the fans, obviously, but the players, and they have trust in him, and they have trust that the front office, with that decision, showed that they know what they're doing. And, of course, I obviously the trading Rondo didn't work out the way it expected, but Norman Powell, Robert Covington, that was one of the biggest fleece trades of last season. So Paul George and Kawhi, the biggest reason that they re-signed with the Clippers for the max money, besides the max money, is because they have confidence that the front office will do whatever it takes to win, that they know what they're doing. And that all comes from the main man, Lawrence Frank, with a capital L-A, Michael Winger, Jerry West. And Lawrence Frank, I just love, he seems to say all the right things. I mean, I talked about in the last episode about the continuity versus load management. And then in this one, he talked about the camaraderie, the enthusiasm within the team, and he just says all the right things. So we're really blessed to have him as Clipper fans. And we're also blessed to have Paul George, who looks as locked in as you can believe. By the way, he also said that Steve Ballmer's in a group chat with them. Obviously, assuming there's one group chat where it's just the players, but it's funny that they're even in a group chat with Steve Ballmer, which just shows, he's much more. Is Donald Sterling in a group chat with his teams? I don't think so, but I could be wrong, but I highly doubt it. Steve Ballmer is in group chats with these guys. Like, it just shows how close the team is and how different things are around here. And it was funny. Jimmy Maggio asked, is he an emoji guy? And PG says he's not an emoji guy. But yeah, there are so many things to be excited about, Clipper Nation. It feels so different than any other season that I've experienced as a fan. It's the optimism of 2019-20, but not as optimistic because we know that it can still go wrong. We know that as fans, one injury could ruin everything. So everybody is proceeding on the side of caution and focus. As far as the players focus, because as fans, we just watch the games and hope for the best. But they're focused. They know what's at stake, and they know they have a chance to make history at the Staples Center this season. And if you want to catch me this season, all season long, where we're going to have all the news, every single game broken down, you look no further than Locked On Clippers right here. Make sure to answer the question: is Steve Ballmer the best owner in the NBA, like Paul George said? Is he? Answer it in the pinned comment on the YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is the fastest way to grow the show. Locked On Clippers is one of only 2 Locked On NBA channels without 1,000 subscribers. We're proving everyone right that we have no fans, guys. Go hit that subscribe button and let's get to 1K. And of course, hit the subscribe button on my own personal YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, where you can find the vlog of the whole interview I just referenced, all the quotes that I just mentioned. You can find it there. And of course, Clipper vlogs and post games all season long on my channel. Make sure you subscribe. And also, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and get in touch with me that way at Dime Dropper Pod on both Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And as always, the age-old proverb, go Clippers.